much for having me here. Who has heard of ChatGPT? Amazing, still few people who have not, so I'm so excited about that. I'm going to tell you about it today. A little bit more than that. So I am the founder and CEO of MeltMinds. MeltMinds is a startup. I started about 3-4 months ago. I used to work for Microsoft before that. And it is an organizational intelligence platform, and we are all about AI. AI for people, AI powered, AI using OpenAI, AI using organizational data, AI using large language models. And if you'd like to know more about us, please follow us on LinkedIn. I've already mentioned about myself, but feel free to follow me on LinkedIn as well. I share a lot of information around AI, responsible AI, large language models, OpenAI, as well as D&I. So when I say D&I, I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So our platform is all about diversity, inclusion, equity, and inclusion, and the productivity side of it, and the financial side of it, and the organizational progressiveness side of it. So if you're interested in any of those, please follow me on LinkedIn as well. Okay, this morning we're going to talk about OpenAI, and then we're going to talk about ChatGPT. But before we go any forward, does anyone know why OpenAI became, when it came in, when the new ChatGPT model, which is not the 4 now, 3.5 or 3, came out in November, why did it become big? What happened? Yeah, please.
Uni students started using it.
Very true, very true, very true. So it became accessible. It made it available to just almost anyone and everyone. And it didn't become available to anyone and everyone just because it was a website and you could just log in and you could do things with it. It actually did take AI to the next level. It did take the information that is accessible to the next level. It took the interactability to the next level. So any generations of AI that we had before in terms of machine learning, in terms of deep learning, they were still talking like robots. And then then OpenAI came, which was not talking to us like robots. It was not limiting the information to a particular data set. It was literally taking everything that we do on internet or World Wide Web or our large search platforms of the name I'm not supposed to say here. It took all of that into a very empathic manner into providing you with context. So if you ask something, it will provide you information for that. But if you ask something and provide it a context, you tell it like, I want to learn about AI, but I want to learn AI for making robots, or I want to learn AI for going to, space. It will actually give you things to do with your context. So that's one of the very powerful, and speed and all those kind of understanding human language, all those kind of things really made it quite big as well. But the topic that we're doing today is slightly different to that. We're actually bringing it back now. So one of the problems that happened with OpenAI, or not problems, but it's amazing, but what is still a problem or not widely understood is, okay, this is amazing. It's good for uni students. It's good for people just wanting to know information. But what can we do of it in our business? We have a large organization. We have a lot of data. We don't have very good systems, or a system that tells something to any kind of question, be it HR question, or be it a customer question, or be it a finance question. We don't have this kind of, it would be amazing to get this kind of platform internally, but how do we do it? Do we really have to do all the work that OpenAI did to make something similar to that for our organization? Where do we start? So that's kind of where, and if we do use OpenAI for all those kind of questions, then where is my data going? Am I asking the question and telling my information to the World Wide Web, and it's just going to grow there? So all those questions led to concerns that the organizations are talking about how to go about, bringing it into the organization. So Azure came up with something called, or Microsoft came up with something called Azure OpenAI services. What is it? Anyone has an idea?
Hosting your own models.
Sorry?
Hosting your own models in Azure.
Exactly. So not just the models in Azure, but it actually lets you create an instance of it. So OpenAI is a model. It lets you create instance of it as well. But when you create that instance, it's still in the OpenAI platform. It's still outside your organizational environment. It's still outside your organizational governance. But what we have all been doing with Azure is we've been bringing our virtual networks, our privacy into our cloud. We've been bringing our governance into the cloud. We have, as you will listen to some of the talks later today, it is way ahead in terms of security, privacy, securing governance, how you do things in Azure. There's a lot of maturity, if you could say, inside organizations that have already come into Azure. So what we do now with OpenAI is OpenAI services becomes one of the resources inside your Azure cloud. It lets you create models. It lets you train it with additional data. It lets you add your organizational data on it. So that's kind of what we will look at very shortly. So we can do it. Now, the question is how we can do it. So think about inside an organization, you have a user. That user can be an internal employee. That user can be a customer. Now, that user is engaging or asking a question to an app. That app can, again, be an enterprise internal app or an external app. That question goes to your organizational knowledge. It picks up the context. It takes the, whatever the information it needs from the organizational knowledge. Then it takes it to OpenAI service that is actually sitting inside your organizational Azure subscription inside maybe in your country's data center or location where you have all your other organizational resources and governance and enterprise applications and line of business applications. So what you then do is bring all of that together and back into the answer to the user. This is called prompting. This is called grounding. You might have heard different names. This is exactly what, to some extent, Bing is using to do that, to provide you the chatting features, functionality that it has now in the browser search. But the problem with this is when you tell something to a API for a call in terms of providing context, that is, how much information can you send? Azure and OpenAI are going to charge you by the tokens. So when you ask a question, your question gets broken into words, and then they get broken into certain tokens, and you get charged per token. So how many chapters or how many of your organizational information records can you send in every call? Not that many. If you do, you'll be poorer and poorer, and Microsoft will be richer and richer, which they do want, but they don't want it ridiculously at your expense, at the customer's expense. So you have options like this. So what happens here is you have your organizational data that could be sitting in the cheapest data source possible. You can have it in the cold store if you want, or any of your Azure cheapest data stores. It can be structured. It can be unstructured, whichever type of data that you have that you want to use for your organizational context. What you do then is you put it through a search layer. What that search layer does is this embedding service takes your large amount of data and converts that into vectors. Has anyone heard of vectors? Well, there we go. We've got some techies in the room. Excuse me. So what vectors are in the layman terms, it's literally dot points floating in the air in a large database. And the separation of those dots in angle from the 3D space determines how alike they are. So this is way further than the older technology in which to find out how two texts or two pieces of information are similar. We used to compare, what are the similar words, Does the meaning come out to be the same or not? So that was really hard, and that was not even always correct. But when you convert every piece of information into a dot in a 3D space, angle between them can very accurately tell you how alike is the information. Now, why do we care how alike is the information? What happens is, think about a scenario for an insurance company. Now, they have a lot of data, more than maybe I think a lot of other businesses. Policies, claims, information about how to create a policy. So their information is large amount of information in documents. Now, when a customer has an incident, they don't want to, they don't really care about what information the company has to go through, or a bot has to go through, or an application has to go through to provide them the information. So all that customer cares is, as if you can read it up there, I left my iPad in the car, my car's stolen, is my iPad covered or not? That's all they care for. They don't have any other, and the less questions they're asked about it, the better it is. So what happens is, this text now goes through the OpenAI embeddings, similar to what we did in our search, but now this is getting broken down into vectors again. So it's again, now this question is getting into dot points. Then quickly we compare those dot points with the dot points that are in our database, in our search layer, instead of going through all the large text that was there. So that's how it gets that answer quickly, but it is still organizational data. So it only knows, say for example, in this scenario, that content up to $1,000 is covered. It does not know if the iPad is covered. We know that quickly, that contents up to $1,000 is covered, but it still does not know that the iPad is covered. So what does it do? At this point, similar to the previous model, we push it back into the ChatGPT-4 as a prompt, along with the information that we quickly picked up, and that information looks up the generally available information from OpenAI or internet, whatever you want to call it, and goes back and says, in an empathetic manner, we care about it, and the only good thing here is your question is, to respond to your question, your iPad is covered, because that's all the person cares. They do not really want to know that I now have to check for my iPad price, how much was it before, how much is it now, is it covered or not, and things like that. The only thing they care about is, in an empathetic manner, I'm in a problem, what is my solution, what is my clue, how can you settle my anxiety? And that's where these kind of solutions and these kind of use cases really help. What I want to do is very quickly jump into our very familiar Azure portal. I'm assuming everyone's seen an Azure portal. Yep, cool. So this is a resource group, and what you've got in here is all the resources that made my application. So you've got things like your standard stuff, and you've got the Redis cache search, and you've got things like here, which we didn't have it over there in the diagram, but you can put things like translator, form services, if you've got forms and things like that. And if you're working in multilingual geographies, you can actually bring that in together as well. So all of that makes this kind of solution. Now, I'm going to jump into just a little interface and show you a couple of things. So this is based on a repo that is publicly available in Git. So if anyone needs, we can share that after as well. So what I did was I uploaded a few documents into an interface here, where you can actually browse the files just for testing purposes that are that you want to use as your organizational knowledge for the solution. And if I show you here, these are some of the ones did last night. It seems like some of them went through properly, some didn't. So the JPEGs were actually the forms, but seems like they didn't go properly. When I say go properly, is they've been converted, but the second column says embeddings added or not. So embeddings is the vector points that we're talking about. So all it's done is done that for 2 PDFs here, and those PDFs are, if I could show you here, they're actually, they are just a couple of policy documents. One's from an RMA and one's from I think, Allianz. So if now we go and ask a question here for something to do with what you would expect in an NRMA and Allianz policy, it will tell us that the answer it's getting from those documents, or it could not find in those documents because that's the context we are asking the question in. Any suggestions for the question that we should ask? Come on.
Is my policy valid?
That's a good question. I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so is my policy, oops, sorry, wasn't supposed to clear, was supposed to enter. Is my policy valid? Okay, oh no, it did go through. The provided text does not contain information to determine the validity of your policy. So maybe because it's the policy more like the information, it doesn't have any policy number. We didn't provide it any of the user context, any of the answers that it could. But you can see that the source it's getting here is from these JPEGs and not from the policy document, because these JPEGs are actually sample forms of people's policies. So that's why it did not go to the policy details, but rather it went to the actual instances of people's policies. So let's try to ask for something that you would look for in a policy itself.
Do you cover unlisted drivers?
Okay. Okay. Are unlisted drivers covered? Okay, this information does not mention anything about unlisted drivers either. Any other suggestions? I tried one last night, that worked, so let's try that. I asked it, what is required to get a insurance policy? I think it worked last time. It might just decide not to. Okay, there you go. It is picking something. And it's interesting because it's picking even these information like name, address, policy number. It's picked them up from the instances of the forms and not from the policy document itself. But that's really the thing as well with when you bring things into, this is not even fine tuning a model. So what happens is to bring it internally, what you can do is you can ask questions, you can add additional data as a supplemented source, or you can actually change the model itself. To change the model, originally everyone thought, it has so much information, we give it a little bit more information, it should just work amazingly, but it doesn't. So fine tuning, that's what fine tuning is called. Fine tuning is not as recommended a solution. You would go about fine tuning if you really if any of the other context is not, solutions is not working for you and you really need to fine tune it. But what, even in the other solutions, what happens is you have to provide it information and then you have to prompt and see what kind of information is being picked in which way. So that's where a lot of information really comes in handy as well. So any other suggestions or questions, actually? Can we, are there any questions in this context or anything that we've talked so far?
Just a question on the kind of domain specific nature of it. So this is about insurance. Are there different OpenAI models for different domains that would in actual ways matter?
Not yet. I would see that as being a very good actually source or industry solutions. Hopefully they come, because you're right. What it does is what we are doing is there's a base model and base architecture, and you have your scenarios if you want a rich data source of your organization, or if you want just small context of your organization to ask the questions. But what you just mentioned is there a industry vertical of each of these models available as either a Azure-based solution or as a LLM by itself? I do not think so at the moment. So you can, though, create it very, very easily. I use the word loosely. But what you can do is this same architecture that we were looking at, you can actually use that to, so what we talked about, our context was talking about an organization. So if you are an insurance company, you bring all your data into, if we can go back here. Oh. Sorry, we're supposed to go back here. Okay, so so in this scenario, what we talked about, this knowledge base being of one insurance company, but it doesn't have to be, right? So if you are an insurance provider, or if you're an aggregator, and you like, I know of in the banking scenario, there are brokers, but then there are integrators that provide their business case. Business is providing a platform to brokers, so they are a little bit better than most banks, but they are a little bit more standardized than individual brokers. So if you're providing that as an integrator service, and your business is all about providing one domain knowledge, expertise of that domain knowledge, there's nothing to say you could potentially, you can't use the same model as that's in that service. Yes, please.
For the OpenAI, as far as I know, this service is available on the free regions.
Can we please have the mic, if possible?
I can speak louder. This service is only available in 3 regions.
That's right.
Europe, Central Europe, 2 US region, and for the insurance company in Australia, banking, government, there is a simple policy: we should not use.
You are spot on. So I'll just repeat the question. The question is the context that we're using here for insurance, and even for a lot of other contexts like government context as well. We are in Australia so particular about when we are where we are storing our data. And thank you so much for asking that question. And sorry, I didn't get your name.
My name is Yega.
Yega, thank you so much, Yega, for your question, because that is the top of the mind for everyone here. Like people right now, organizations even are struggling still in Australia to go to even make a valid business case internally to go to cloud, let alone to go to, and that's real. We have it. We have the problem in Australia that we like to keep our data here. We like to know that every service that is available when we go to cloud, it's here in Australia, not just the main data center, but any processing service even that is happening on top of that is here. And that is for a number of very good reasons. So you have a very good point. None of these, or not none of these, but the OpenAI services, the nice circle logos here, they are only in 3 regions right now. They are in US, Europe, and what was the third one?
US West, US East, and Central Europe.
That's right. So 2 places in US and one in Europe. But what my Whisper understanding is, or not the Whisper API. So Whisper is another an API that you can use also to engage with OpenAI API services. But what Microsoft is looking to do is, it's actually speaking on behalf of Microsoft, who I do not work for, but my understanding, it's actually coming. The whole idea of having it as inside Azure is to have it in your data center. So it is coming. They're picking up regions in as they're growing. But you have to remember, up until, or even for me to get OpenAI within even Azure, within even the data centers that is there at the moment, and I do a lot of work in this space, I had to go through a number of forms and approvals. And there are multiple reasons where you have to be mindful when you're extending to so many other areas, so many other customers, and that is one, these things take a lot of compute. So they have to, think about that and make it a good service. But at the same time, you have to have a responsible AI mindset. So when you want to use these, just the way as powerful it is externally, it is still just as powerful inside Azure as well. Rather, you probably even have more access because you have more power to do things and use it with the information that is not already in there. So it's coming. And the exactness of coming, I'll let Microsoft, if anyone's in the room from Microsoft who could share that. 5 minutes left as well. So, but thank you so much. That's a very good question, and that's spot on. That right now it's not in Australia. It should be coming just like any other service that comes, it slowly expands, but when, I do not know the exact time frame.
Actually, do you have any idea about being in preview? Because I believe it's just that these regions as part of being in preview, you know, are there any timelines about when it might be coming out of preview?
I can ask that question and get back to you, but as I said, I do not work for Microsoft, so I do not have the inside knowledge, and it's good that I do not. Yeah, but if you want to connect after, I am talking to a lot of people in the OpenAI space internally, in the AI space, and with help from Microsoft startups as well. So I should be able to take your question.
That is great, because I'm actually doing something related to this, and I have to go through a lot more difficult hoops than this, just because Australia a bit. So yeah, I'll talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to. Thank you. Any other questions? We have a couple of more minutes.
Just one.
Yes, please.
So basically, you can request Microsoft for OpenAI.
That's right. Yes.
And probably they will be giving you private preview.
Absolutely.
Probably in 15 to 20 days.
That's right. So that's absolutely right. But even that is not in Australia. That's the thing that we were talking before. So you can even you brought a very good point. So right now, if you go into Azure and you just try to create an OpenAI resource, you can't. Not everyone can. You have to fill in a form. It takes about 10 days or so for you to be accepted, and then you can actually get the resource. And it's still not in Australia at the moment, even after you get that. Okay, we've already done the demo. Just a quick announcement before we go. We are actually starting to do some enterprise OpenAI training. So if this was of interest to you and you would like to know more, talk more about your business context, please scan here, and I would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for today.